Alright, superstars, we're going to go over 4 key things you need to remember for your English short story exam. So we're going to cover 4 different things today. We're going to talk about the epigraph, the theme, show don't tell, and symbolism. So looking at our first point, we need to talk about your epigraph. So an epigraph is a short quote from an author that's used in another text. So a writer, if they're writing a new story or a poem, maybe they want to borrow an idea from another poet or writer. And what they can do is take some of their work and quote it at the beginning of their new piece. And what this does is it tells the reader, hey, this is sort of what I'm focusing on in my current poem or short story. Remember what this other guy wrote? I'm sort of talking about that. So what does an epigraph look like? So epigraph goes under the title, okay? And these things exist outside of the story. So you have your title, your epigraph, and then following on from that, your story. Think of the title and the epigraph as separate from the story. Your epigraph does not go in your story, okay? Remember that. Your epigraph does not go into your story. Imagine this being like the beginning titles to a TV show, okay? Your title and your epigraph. They're the beginning, title, the theme song, whatever. When you get into the actual action of the show or the movie, that's the story, and that stuff is separate, right? This is kind of the illusion of a story world, the storytelling. Whereas all the stuff up here, stuff outside of the story, is kind of directly talking to the reader and telling them, hey, this is sort of what the name of my piece is, and here's a bit of hint as to what it will be about. So can you pause and think about what is your epigraph, and have you got it memorized? Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is theme. Just to recap, a theme is a universal lesson, message, or idea explored in a text. So I pointed out universal because what that means is it can be applied to a lot of different aspects of someone's life. So it means that, if we're writing a story about, for example, To Kill a Mockingbird, we'll use that as an example, sorry, and it's about, 1950s, I think, America, and if we think about the theme in that, it's about justice and understanding someone else's, plight and walking a mile in someone else's shoes. That's the theme and message we get. We're not just going to apply that to 1950s America. We're going to take that theme universally, which means that we're going to take the message and apply it to our current life. We're going to take the message from a story, from a poem, and we're going to see how it can apply to our own life. Okay? So in a theme, we have 2 things. We have a concept and a statement. A concept is the broad idea. So for example, I could say my concept is love, okay? And that's the really broad idea. But the statement is what's important. It's, well, what am I actually saying about love? Am I saying that, it doesn't exist or something? Am I going to be, very pessimistic? Or what, okay? So you will have, I'm sure, a concept of the other. That's your concept, the other. But what's your statement? What are you actually trying to tell me? What are you actually trying to tell your audience? So pause now and think, what is your concept and what is your statement? Okay. So the third thing I want to talk about is show, don't tell. Now this comes from an author, Anton Chekhov, and he's quoted as saying, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass." So don't just tell me it was a beautiful day. Show me what was beautiful about it. What were the trees doing? What was the sound? What could you hear and smell to make it beautiful? Okay, so showing versus telling. So telling is what I see consistently because we get excited as a writer. We get excited about our story. We really want to get into it and tell our reader everything that's happened. Okay, and that's where we sort of start to report things. We're just sort of saying, this happened, then this happened. We're not really covering, hey, Basil, it's okay. We're not really covering the showing part of things, the sensory description of our scene. So when we're telling, we're just reporting. Oh no. When we're telling, we're just reporting. We're maybe saying thought verbs, so things like, Mr. Jorgensen imagined what his life would be like as a famous actor. Whereas if we showed it, it would be something like, Mr. Jorgensen looked off into the distance. He was picturing fantasies in his mind, and his eyes were moving, glimpsing what the stage might have looked like for him. Okay? When we show, we're also using figurative language, expressive vocabulary, and dialogues. We're showing our reader. So, for example, an example of showing. As his mother switched off the light and left the room, Michael tensed. He huddled under the covers, gripped the sheets, and held his breath as the wind brushed past the curtain. Whereas telling, Michael was terribly afraid of the dark. So what you can see here is this huge difference. We're showing the scene happen, okay? We're talking about how Michael tensed. We're seeing what he did. We're getting the touch sense, the gripping, the holding of breath, and the wind brushing past. We could hear the wind. So it really describes the scene far more vividly. And what's exciting about stories is that we can actually come up with how Michael's feeling. Our understanding of Michael's personality or attitude will be completely different, maybe to your interpretation as you're writing this. Because when you write, you might be thinking, well, I'm trying to show that he's scared, but a reader might see it as something a bit more nuanced. Maybe they're seeing the mood of the story and they're thinking, maybe Michael isn't just scared of the dark, but maybe there's something more sinister happening. And it just creates a more interpretable story that is far more interesting, okay? So when to tell. So telling is not a no-go, okay? But you can tell when you need to move your story somewhere. So if you need to get from one place to another, use tell, okay? You're moving your story. Now, that doesn't mean constantly move your setting, because remember, a short story is, a small set of characters, a couple of places, like one or two settings, okay? And that's all you're focusing on. So don't stress, right? Show, don't tell is a wonderful device if you're concerned about your word count. I can guarantee you can see here, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words, okay, telling, whereas over here we have far more, right? We have, 20 or so, 20 plus words. So you're essentially doubling your word count. You're cutting down all the stuff, all the telling, all those events, and you're really focusing on beautifully describing a couple of things. So I put some practices here, and you can do this, you can do it with your own story, whatever, but here's an example. So John had a job interview, he was really nervous, and we could just tell that to our reader. But rather, let's think about how we can make it far better. So John's resume was tattered where he'd been clutching it tightly. He tapped his feet nervously, swallowed and looked at the door to the office. John Warcroft, the receptionist asked. He nodded and she gestured towards the door. Good luck, she added. So in this scene here, rather than just saying he had an interview, he was nervous, we get a real sense of his attitude, how nervous he was. And, right, we're having more of a story being told. We can see the scene. We have the dialogue, the receptionist doing things, an active participant, okay? So pause now, have a go at the practice ones. You can do it in your head or on a piece of paper, or go to your story. Can you see where you've shown and can you see where you've told? And think about where you've told, was that right? Can you make it better? Can you make it more engaging? Have a go. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is symbolism. And this is one of the features we're looking for in your stories. And it's a literary device where a writer is using one thing to represent something more abstract. And that thing can be a physical object at the base level, which is kind of what I'm just going to talk about at the moment. So symbols are typically a physical thing your character can interact with in a story. They're typically, as well, they can be people, right, as symbols of authority, and such, like police officers symbolizing authority, teachers symbolizing dullness, okay, whatever. All right, but at a base level, the abstract idea is, At a base level, we're going to talk briefly about an example. So say we have a keychain with a photo of a family on it, okay? Maybe it's just even a necklace. Did I say keychain? Whatever. But we could, as a writer, think about how the symbol that I've included, which is the necklace with the photo on it, and I'm like, well, this is sort of representing family, this symbol. And as I'm writing my story, I'm maybe wanting to talk about how, don't throw away family, otherwise you'll like suffer or something bad will happen. And maybe my character throws away their locket with the picture of the family. And what that shows is it's throwing away family, it's discarding them, right? So rather than, them cutting ties with their family and having a whole scene about it, I can use a symbol to express it in more of an abstract way, to express it more subtly, okay? Some other examples of symbols we can see are things like, watches and clocks to represent time. We can think about things that represent broader ideas like justice. We can think about the scales of justice for any of my legal studies viewers, the scales of justice, balancing probability and such. And you can think about how you can embed these symbols. Think of some things you could associate with your character or your events in your story and use that symbol as a storytelling device, okay? So to practice, right, what symbols do you have in your story? Do you have any? Maybe you've got one in there that you haven't really explored, right? You could have an object in your story that you haven't necessarily used to its full potential. If you don't have a symbol, think about what symbol you could create for your story or character. What message would it send? Okay, so I'm going to quickly cover some of those ideas in my example. So I had this up here before about the epigraph, and you don't have to watch anymore, just focus on your story, but I'm going to talk through a bit of my paragraph here just to show you that I've kind of explored some of the ideas I've spoken about. So obviously I've got the title and my epigraph, but in my story I've tried to show rather than tell. So the thread dangled low from a fresh suture, right? A lot of vivid imagery. It tailed behind the creature, pointing backwards to the facility he just escaped. Okay? And I'm giving you a bit of exposition here as well. I am telling a little bit because I've only got 800 to 1,000 words. I cannot, create some kind of or show every single thing about my world. I need to do a bit of telling, okay? Its lights now off for good. So a bit of subtle writing there. The red soil, sunburnt from the millennia of ozone destruction, parted for the creature's feet. I forgot a apostrophe there, okay. His feet that were scoured from ancient tombs of his people, his old tribe. It wasn't yet clear who the creature was because he was a mosaic of a man. Each part of him was dug up, tested on in a lab, and then stitched together to make him. So in my story, right, I've got a symbol happening already, and that symbol's the thread. And it's relating to my title here, right? Connecting those things together. And the symbol of the thread, as a writer, when I'm writing this, I'm thinking, well, the thread is kind of like this idea of like what makes us human, or what makes us, I guess, whole. It's what connects us together. And the idea that like the thread is dangling shows that he's not a complete person just yet, that he's not whole. And that's my justification. As a reader, you probably read it and go, who cares? It's thread. Why is thread dangling from this person? But as a writer, you're trying your best to create and influence the reader. You can't perfectly control their mind and perfectly control their response, but do your best, okay? Put in all the devices that you need. Likewise, my theme, this idea of he was grown in a laboratory, somewhere I've got that, the laboratory, the facility he just escaped. And this idea of, I guess I'm going into this idea of what does it mean to come from the lab and to be stitched together? And I'm going to be playing on my epigraph here for my theme about, the clashing of cultures and the otherness. And I'm going to be talking about how, I suppose, if we keep treating the world the way we do, and we keep othering people and we keep ignoring ideas, then the consequences are awful, dire even. The fact that this creature who represents an older culture, which is inspired from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, the fact that cultures can only be created from parts of something shows that we're creating this diaspora of culture even within our own nations. So we're creating these divides in our world, okay? And that's my theme, and then that's my thematic statement as well, okay? And I'll pause it there because I'm just going to keep going on and on. So if you have any questions, please email me. All of the resources you require are on our teams. If you are struggling with any of these 4 things and you don't want to email me, Google them. There are so many blogs. There are so many tips for young writers out there on the internet, YouTube videos, countless, okay? Have a go, have a look, have a think before your exam, and practice, okay?